Good morning, dads. It is Friday, May 1st, 2020. Um, I've jokingly said every week this is week unknown of the quarantine. Interestingly, I tried to look that up this morning and it was hard to pin down. Again, this is Dominic. I'm your nurse dad with a health and wellness update. And being that it's May 1st and we've been several weeks into the coronavirus. I'm going to start with a COVID update, as I have been. I've encouraged continuing to look at the official websites like the CDC or the government websites for information, and they've been very helpful. As of either late last night or this morning, because some update differently, they're showing 6 million people tested, 1 million, over 1 million people tested positive for the virus, and we've had about 60,000 deaths. Um, Interestingly, if you may not know, we have about 328 million people in the United States. So, as I've encouraged, don't get focused in too tightly on just the numbers. Those are relative. As I've been encouraging, watch for the continued testing, especially the serology tests or the antibody tests that are starting to roll out more commonly now. One of our local lab providers just announced that they have the antibody testing readily available now. Doctors are starting to prescribe it. This is a difficulty with numbers, and it's not going to be very easy to nail it down. So again, I'm encouraging, look at your local area, look at the micro, look at the smaller area around where you're at, and scrutinize all data. It's important to understand what the data means and how it applies to you specifically. New York and Los Angeles are completely different than Tyler, Texas, or Peoria, or even Florida and Spokane. So look at what's going on in your neighborhood and what your numbers look like. Our county in Southern California here, San Bernardino County, the largest in the U.S., is sending out a daily email with numbers and local information. And that's still good to know, but that's not the whole picture. My wife works at a local hospital, and it's a very different piece of information. Many of you may have seen the two doctors from Bakersfield, California, who released a video that's been slightly controversial, but they're speaking about what they're seeing in their emergency rooms and clinics locally. And I think that's going to be a better indicator of the health of your neighborhood and your community and what we need to do going forward. As a nation and as a world, very different picture and not something I can do much about. So I try to keep that stress and concern relative. So watch for the serologies, the sero surveys, the antibody tests in your area. That'll be a much better indicator of how many of us may have already had this and gotten over it, or thought we had a mild flu a while ago and that was really the COVID-19. There's still been more seasonal flu deaths than the COVID-19, but that's something we've been used to dealing with. So one's not worse than the other. They're different viruses. And so on that note, I wanted to do kind of a virus 101. A virus is, and I think this is the best analogy I can come up with, a virus is basically like a thumb drive, or even a flash disk. It's not alive per se. You can't set it on the counter and it will do something. It's got a hard shell and it's got data in it. And it's not even a complete piece of DNA typically. Usually it's just a piece of RNA. Long story, many of us have schooled on, but it's a piece of genetic code. And so that virus kind of moves along with that data and it plugs into certain kinds of cells. That's why a flu virus doesn't make your pinky swell up and fall off, because that data and the way that it plugs in typically only goes to certain types of cells. So mucous membranes that are in your sinuses and your lungs and your throat very commonly are affected by viruses, and they tend to plug into those well. The virus will then dump its information into that cell, and then it tells that, it starts replicating that virus within that cell. That's why that piece of data, let's say it's an Excel spreadsheet, it works in those kind of cells in that species. So that will work in a human. That's why it's real uncommon for your dog to catch the same flu that you have, because it's a different kind of cell. And that same data won't work in their lungs. There are a few that cross over, and that's where it gets kind of confusing. But that virus mutates, another scary word. That just means the coding changes, whether it's how it works or how it's duplicating or what cell it affects. The cross species and coming from bats or pigs or swine flu, or it gets kind of in the mud, and you could spend a lifetime getting a PhD just on that. But the basic is that's what a virus is. So that's what's great about killing viruses. You can set that on a counter or in the sunlight or a disinfectant. Once you break that shell down, that virus is dead. So that's where disinfecting and killing of viruses can be a little easier. But we don't fight it like a piece of bacteria. A bacteria is an organism all to itself. It's like a whole computer. It can do its own thing, and it produces its own bad stuff or good stuff. There's good bacteria. But a bacteria is an organism. Let's say it's like a rat. It runs around and does its own thing. A virus isn't a living organism, so it has to hitch a ride on one of our cells to do its thing, and that's why we get sick the way we do. Pluses and minuses, those have been around for a long time. We've changed the coding of viruses to inject good DNA code into genetic type diseases in experimentation. If you've heard of CRISPR or other items, they use a virus to inject that code into a cell to then fix it. Where this virus came from that we're dealing with, I'll let other people debate, and at some point we'll know more of the real story. Either way, pay attention to your area, whether it's the masks, the disinfections, the social distancing. Those are good for eliminating any kind of exchange of bad bugs, bacteria or viruses. You've heard of spinal meningitis. That spreads real easy in a college dorm because everybody's close together and probably not living as healthy as they should. Similar deal. This is making a difference with the social distancing, the staying home orders, and the masks, whether they're really physically blocking us or not. I contend it's not as helping as much as some would hope, but it gives us that social distancing, and it helps us understand, hey, we need to be separate a little more till this thing dies down better. That's the COVID. Do the reading, but scrutinize the data. Try not to get caught up in either extreme, the end of the worlders or this is all a scam. It's somewhere in the middle. We'll figure it out. We're going to be better. We're already getting better. Be cautious and pay attention to your health. Because there are people that are dying from it, especially the older population or those that are more at risk. You're going to hear a term called comorbidity. That means there's other issues. I have asthma, I'm a little heavy, and I'm very allergic to shellfish. Could those issues make it a little more worse to catch the disease? Maybe. But again, these numbers will pan out later. Don't get caught up in the numbers. Pay attention to your local community and how they're distancing or putting measures in to limit the spread of any disease, especially the COVID-19 at this time. But as the weather warms, and this is a perfect time of year, allergies are getting worse. I'm a big seasonal allergy guy. Besides the shellfish, boy, pollen gets me, and I'm fortunate here in the Southern California desert, it's less than in other areas. So, and I know our kids that tend to pop up with allergies. Here's Allergy 101. Allergies come from your immune system, which is very interesting. It ties into arthritis and some other issues. Again, you get your PhD just trying to understand all that. But your allergy system produces what's called histamines. That's why the drugs are called antihistamines. Histamines are a way of your body's attacking a problem. So, pollen gets into your body. Your body thinks it's an invader. Kind of is, but it's not a bacteria or a virus. But it'll hit your mucous membranes in your nose. Body says, oh my God, we don't like that. It's something scary and spooky, and get rid of it. So histamines are released, and they rush to your sinus passages, and everything swells up. And then your nose starts running, and your eyes start running. Your body's doing its job. It's trying to flush that foreign invader out. Where we get into trouble is when the body overreacts. So, a good example, I'm allergic to shellfish. So my body will see shellfish, whether it's ingest it or accidentally inhale it at Benihana's because somebody cooked it on the grill. It sees that foreign invader and it overreacts. It sends too many histamines, a too strong a response to those mucous membranes. Well, as I said before, mucous membranes are in your throat and lungs. And a common anaphylactic or severe allergy reaction is swelling of the airways. now you're in real trouble. A simple antihistamine over-the-counter drug is not going to stop that, and that's where emergency procedures are needed. So, interestingly, one of my children, when they were little, we gave them ibuprofen, and all of a sudden his eyes are getting puffy, and his face is getting puffy, and he didn't have any breathing issues, but I recognized right away he's having an allergic reaction. So he's never going to have ibuprofen again. Maybe he'll grow out of it, maybe he won't. We'll test that much down the road. Over-the-counter drugs, the antihistamines like Claritin, Allegra, Zyrtec, Tavist, those are all antihistamines, and they help block the receptors of where those histamines will land in your body and help minimize. So if you're trying to beat the allergy, it's best to take the antihistamines ahead of time. I left Benadryl out for a reason. I'll get right back to that. So your body's not going to get swollen as much, and you're not going to flush it as much. But is that what you want to do? So if I'm planning on working on the yard and weed whacking and getting in the weeds, yeah, I'm going to be miserable, but my body's doing what it's supposed to, so maybe I want to let it do that and let it flush my eyes and my nose, and I'll take the antihistamine later after I've had a shower, gotten that extra pollen and weed off of me, so then I'm not having a continual reaction. Something to think about as you look at those medications. If Claritin doesn't work for you, try Allegra, try one of the others. Now, Benadryl has been a drug that's been around a long time. That's a very strong antihistamine reaction that some people actually feel kind of weak, or the term sometimes is used as spineless. There's a small percentage of our population, and one of my daughters happens to be one of those, that actually get hyper when they take Benadryl. It's a very unique type of antihistamine compared to the other newer over-the-counters that we have, like the Allegra and Zyrtec and Claritin. So you want to know how Benadryl affects you. You don't want to use it when you're drinking alcohol. You want to be careful about using heavy equipment, because some people can affect almost like a narcotic and make you very weak or listless or not as strong in the head. But it's a great antihistamine. So when my kid's eyes started swelling right away from the ibuprofen, he got Benadryl in about 2 seconds, because I knew that was going to get the reaction down, and we can watch for anything more serious. Anytime someone starts having more than a scratchy throat, you can hear them breathing, they're wheezing, getting raspy, croup cough. If you dads have experienced that, getting that seal-like bark in the throat. Anytime there's an airway involvement, get ready to seek emergency services right away, because that's not something that typically the over-the-counters can handle. So it's something you definitely want to pay attention to. That's allergies. As before, if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to put them in so that we can answer those, even if it's on replay, connect you with resources. This has been, this weekly talk is going to continue as long as we can to talk about all kinds of subjects. If there's something you'd like to hear more about, whether I'm experienced as a nurse or my wife, I can do the research also and bring you a simplified version. So last thing I want to touch on today is ergonomics. You may not know this, but most of our jobs, somebody has spent the time to evaluate your workstation and make suggestions to the company, hopefully they followed it, on how safe your workstation is for long-term work. So examples would be people who type a lot, especially secretaries. Last handful of years, you saw very large gel pads underneath the pad to help raise your wrists and try to eliminate carpal tunnel syndrome. Good ergonomic chairs that sit right, that position your back and your butt and your hips all a better way for long periods of sitting. That is something that most companies evaluated to try to have a healthy environment for you to do the work for long periods of time. Side note, you should get up often, probably once an hour. You should get up, walk around, stretch, change your body position. But typing on your computer for hours on end, you're going to wear your wrists out. Your shoulders are going to get bad. If your monitor's not at the right height, you can really hurt yourself in the long run or get sore where you weren't used to being sore. How many of us have taken the time to look at our workstation at home, especially now that we're at work at home a lot more, or the kids schooling at home, right? So simple things to look for right away, and you can certainly Google and read a lot more about good ergonomics. But your monitor should be right below your sight line. You should look straight forward and down a hair, and that was where your monitor should be, as far as for your eyes and not getting the tension headaches at the end of the day because you're looking up too much or looking down too much. You want to set the middle of your monitor just below normal straight line eyesight. Okay. Good chairs. You should have your feet flat on the floor, knees not at a 90-degree angle, not bent up, not bent down. My wife's a little short. Sometimes her feet don't touch the ground. That's not as healthy as having your feet flat on the ground, knees at a 90, and your back in a natural position. And remember, your back is not straight. It's curved for a reason. So your hips want to be rolled forward a little bit. Your chest wants to be out a little bit. So you want to have that natural curve to your spine, and you're going to be healthier and happier in the long run if you've got to sit at the desk for a long time. Here's a funny one. I love to cook. I cook a lot. Some of the things I do take a while at the counter. And what I've learned is I should probably raise my counters 4 to 6 inches. Not happening. How do you raise stone counters? But knowing that, because I'll get pain between my shoulder blades or my low back from cutting for a long period of time or prepping a brisket or getting the ribs ready for the smoker. That's because I'm leaning over or I'm leaning down a little further than is my natural position. So now that I'm aware of that, I change up my workstation. So I have a larger cutting board that will raise the work up a little. I take a break. I shift. I make sure I'm standing straight. I got those great gel mats when they're on sale at Costco that help cushion your feet. That also changes your position, but that helps if you're going to be standing there for a long time. So think about the areas that you're not used to. And if you develop a new pain or a new twist or a new funny thing, you're like, what am I doing? Look at your area. Look what you're doing different. You're sitting funny. Do you have a different chair? Now that we're home more, am I getting a funny pain in my shoulder because I'm lifting things different than I'm used to lifting? Body's pretty good at telling us what's going on. And if you take a moment to look around a little, you might catch something that's easily correctable and then save yourself some problems in the long run. So, here's a simple one my dad told me many, many years ago. How many of you guys carry that thick wallet in your back pocket, right? My dad used to have that old brown, thick, hard leather wallet in his back right pocket. Well, he learned the hard way and taught me right away, don't drive with your wallet in your pocket. It shifts your spine just a little bit, shifts your hips, and moves your spine in an unnatural position. So, long periods of driving with your hips off kilter, you're going to cause some problems in your lower back, whether it's in the muscles or the discs. And all we had to do was take that out and put it in the dash or something to have a more ergonomic position. Think about your lumbar support and pushing your lumbar forward, rolling your hips forward so that you're in a more natural curve. Takes a little bit of practice and a little awareness, but it can make a difference in the long run, or even today. If you're having trouble, especially with low back issues, fixing your position and being aware of that can make a difference and can ease some pains as you get ready to deal with that. And that's where physical therapies are very helpful in strengthening and realigning your bodies. Sometimes even chiropractic work. I'll leave that one for debate. So, appreciate you for listening again this week, dads. I hope you're doing well. As always, I'm going to encourage you, think about your own health, physically and mentally. Find your space, whether it's reading the Bible or a small piece of bourbon, under a tree. You guys remember last week we were very distracted by a woodpecker because we don't see those around here. Sucker's been around all week, and so we've purposely spent some time just watching the woodpecker and what he's doing because it's something new, and it's a mental and emotional release to everything else we got to do, homeschooling and homework and school, the chores, and now the season's getting here. I got to get ahead of the weeds and, find those moments to work on your health because you're doing a good job. The shoulders have been heavy for a while, but they're getting stronger because you can feel it, and you're doing great in leading your family. Whatever form your family is, you're doing a good job. I'm proud of you. The other dads on here are proud of you. Don't hesitate to participate in the conversations. Read what's going on because I'm sure there's a handful of us going through the same thing. But dads like us is why we're going to do okay, and this is still going to be a great place, and we're going to raise our kids in a real world that they're going to be equipped to handle much better than maybe even we were. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.